A police dog persistently barked at a pregnant woman in the mall, leading to confusion and embarrassment. Initially, the incident was disregarded, and security even asked them to leave. However, hours later, doctors revealed a disturbing realization. If the dog hadn't intervened, the baby wouldn't have survived. The following details the actual sequence of events. Please share in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe, as another compelling Royal Guard story will be released tomorrow at the same time. You won't want to miss it. The fluorescent lights of Seattle's downtown precinct hummed overhead as Officer Deborah Morgan clipped the specialized canine vest onto Max, her Belgian Malinois partner of 3 years. Outside, the October rain painted the city streets in glistening reflections. A persistent rain fell, the sort that residents generally ignored but tourists hurried to avoid. Deborah straightened her uniform collar, verified her gear one last time, and looked at the wall clock. It was 7:15 a.m. 15 minutes until their patrol shift formally started. Prepared for another day ensuring the streets were secure. Partner? She inquired, gently scratching behind Max's attentive ears. The dog's intelligent, amber eyes followed her actions with the focused intensity that had earned him a legendary reputation within the department. His muscular physique remained perfectly still as she fastened the specialized canine unit patches, signifying his status as law enforcement rather than a service animal. The precinct was filled with the regulated disorder of shift change. Night officers completing reports before departing for home, day shift receiving assignments, and coffee being consumed in abundance. Sergeant Wallace stopped as he walked by, giving Max a respectful nod. "Got something interesting for you two today, Morgan," he said, presenting a tablet containing their patrol assignments. A shopping mall had reported some minor shoplifting. Ordinarily, a standard patrol unit would be dispatched, but there had been a string of organized retail thefts in that area. Management specifically asked for our best team. Deborah held back a smile at the subtle compliment. Her 7 years with the canine unit had established a reputation for meticulousness, but it was Max who had genuinely defined their partnership. What started as routine patrol and apprehension training transformed when trainers recognized Max's exceptional sense of smell, especially his capacity to identify blood in quantities so small they occasionally bypassed laboratory analysis. This skill set was first used for identifying injured suspects and finding victims during disaster events. 2 years prior, they were involved in the response following the Highway 18 bridge collapse, where Max located 3 victims trapped under rubble that thermal imaging failed to detect. His remarkable accuracy resulted in specialized training with the Medical Detection Research Program at Pacific Northwest University, where researchers continued to investigate the full scope of his abilities. "Another day, another dollar," Deborah commented, attaching Max's lead to her belt as they proceeded towards the parking garage. The specialized canine unit SUV waited in its designated spot, equipment already inspected and loaded during the previous night's end-of-shift protocol. While driving through Seattle's rain-slicked streets, Max sat attentively in his custom compartment, occasionally observing passing pedestrians before refocusing his gaze ahead. Morning traffic flowed with reluctant efficiency, commuters maneuvering between puddles and construction detours as the wipers maintained a steady rhythm against the windshield. Their radio emitted static before delivering the morning's first dispatch. Unit K93 respond to Westfield Shopping Center, south entrance near Macy's. Loss prevention personnel have detained a shoplifting suspect who has requested police assistance for a formal arrest and a potential link to organized retail theft. K93 is responding, Deborah acknowledged, activating her lights to expedite travel through the busy streets. Estimated time of arrival is roughly 8 minutes. Max noticed a change in her voice, a slight transition to the official tone that invariably indicated they were on duty. As they neared the large Westfield shopping center, neither expected this seemingly ordinary call to challenge their teamwork in unforeseen ways. The south entrance was unusually busy for a Wednesday morning. A local school holiday had drawn numerous families, filling the walkways with strollers and teenagers, even with the ongoing rain. Deborah led Max through the automatic doors, and his training was immediately apparent as he moved through the busy area with precise heel alignment, disregarding the infrequent surprised reactions or pointing from children who noticed the police dog. Security Chief Alvarez greeted them just inside. His neat uniform and professional appearance stood in contrast to the visibly distressed young man in handcuffs sitting on a bench nearby. A small collection of merchandise still bearing security tags was gathered as evidence. "Thank you for coming," Officer Morgan, Alvarez said, extending his hand. "We caught this one attempting to leave with approximately $600 worth of electronics. The store manager wishes to press charges, and we've had 3 comparable incidents this month." Deborah nodded, already assessing the surroundings while maintaining a relaxed but firm hold on Max's lead. "We will collect his information and transport him back to the precinct for processing. Are there any witnesses we should speak with?" Alvarez indicated a small group of people waiting close to the security office: a store employee, an elderly man using a cane, and a visibly pregnant woman wearing a blue maternity dress, appearing to be approximately 7 months pregnant. The woman in blue, Emily Thompson, had observed him removing security tags in the electronics department. She was the individual who notified our team. Deborah moved toward the witnesses, with Max moving smoothly alongside her. Gathering statements had become a familiar process for her during her time on the force. Build rapport, collect information in chronological order, address any discrepancies, and thank individuals for their civic duty. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Officer Morgan. I understand you observed the shoplifting incident. I would like to obtain your statement if you—" Max's actions shifted so abruptly that Deborah nearly lost her hold. The Belgian Malinois froze, his nose working intensely, his focus entirely on Emily Thompson. Before Deborah could give a correction, Max emitted 3 distinct barks, not the usual alert bark used in training, but a more pressing, more demanding sound. "Max, quiet," Deborah stated firmly, a blush rising on her cheeks as people turned to look throughout the mall entrance. The dog disregarded her entirely, an unprecedented action in their 3 years together. He edged closer to the pregnant woman, his barks growing louder. Emily Thompson moved backward, her hand moving to shield her belly. "What's wrong with him? Is he dangerous?" she asked, her voice filled with worry as she stepped away. "I'm so sorry," Deborah said, positioning herself between Max and the woman. "He's extremely well trained. This behavior is completely out of character." Security Chief Alvarez advanced, his demeanor shifting from professional to concerned. "Officer Morgan, perhaps you should remove your dog from the premises. We have other witnesses who can provide statements." Max continued to strain toward Emily, whining now between barks, his entire body communicating urgency that Deborah couldn't understand. A small group had assembled, with phones out to capture what was happening. The department certainly didn't need a viral video showing a police dog seemingly intimidating a pregnant woman. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Deborah asked Emily, still working to keep Max under control. "Did he frighten you?" Emily's hand stayed protectively on her abdomen. "I'm fine, just startled. Perhaps he's responding to something different." The baby kicked precisely as he began barking.
"Deborah commanded. Max, settle."
Deborah spoke with greater authority, eventually succeeding in drawing him back a few steps, even though his gaze remained focused on Emily's midsection. His actions were raising concerns for Deborah. This wasn't a display of aggression or a lack of training. It appeared Max was attempting to urgently convey a particular message. "Mrs. Thompson, this may seem unusual, but are you having any medical concerns related to your pregnancy? Any pain or discomfort whatsoever?" Emily appeared surprised by the inquiry. "Just the typical backache and some pressure, nothing unexpected for 7 months." "Why are you asking?" Alvarez's patience was obviously dwindling. "Officer, we have a retail theft suspect in custody and witnesses waiting. If your canine is unable to maintain appropriate behavior, we should proceed with this process without him." Deborah nodded reluctantly, feeling conflicted between her professional duties and the persistent feeling that Max's behavior needed to be addressed. Throughout the 3 years they'd collaborated, he had never been incorrect when alerting with such urgency. "I understand. Mrs. Thompson, I apologize for the interruption. If you are willing to proceed, I'd like to swiftly record your statement so you can leave." As Emily began describing what she'd observed in the electronics department, Max finally sat at Deborah's direction. He kept his gaze fixed on the pregnant woman, his muscles visibly trembling as he fought against whatever his instincts urged him to do. Again, I sincerely apologize for Max's behavior, Deborah said, concluding Emily's statement, her voice remaining professional despite the lingering embarrassment she felt. The pregnant woman had provided detailed information about the shoplifter's actions, but throughout the entire conversation, Max had remained focused on her, whining softly despite Deborah's quiet corrections. It's really fine, Emily insisted, though she kept a cautious distance from the Belgian Malinois. Animals sometimes react unusually around pregnant women. My sister's cat wouldn't leave her alone during her third trimester. Security Chief Alvarez expressed his displeasure, frequently glancing at his watch. Officer Morgan, we must process the suspect and resume regular operations at this entrance. This incident is causing considerable disruption, he stated. Deborah nodded in agreement, pausing briefly before closing her notebook. Mrs. Thompson, would you be willing to have the mall's first aid responder assess your vitals prior to your departure? This is simply a precaution. Max is specially trained in medical detection, and his actions indicate he's alerting to something. Emily's husband, Mark Thompson, a tall man in a business suit, has now joined them. Is that truly necessary? We are already running behind schedule for her prenatal appointment this afternoon. It would only take a minute, Deborah urged calmly. Max has a recorded history of identifying medical concerns prior to human recognition. Mark noticed a touch of worry in Deborah's tone. He thought it likely wouldn't be a problem. Emily had experienced more backaches than usual today. The mall's first aid responder, Rodriguez, who previously worked as an EMT, arrived quickly with a medical kit. His brief examination showed no immediate issues. Emily's blood pressure was a little high, but remained within the expected range for pregnancy. Her pulse was steady, and she indicated no unusual symptoms beyond the normal discomfort of the third trimester. Everything appeared normal, Rodriguez concluded, as he packed away his stethoscope. Blood pressure was slightly elevated, but that's typical after standing and giving police statements. I suggest resting before your doctor's appointment this afternoon. Mark assisted Emily to her feet, his arms providing support around her waist. There, you see? Nothing to worry about. Your dog likely just smelled something else. Deborah nodded, although she noticed Max's continued alertness. We appreciate your understanding. Please don't hesitate to seek medical care if you notice any changes before your scheduled appointment. As the Thompsons walked away in the direction of the mall's north parking structure, Max pulled on his lead, emitting another whine that caused Deborah's stomach to clench with concern. Officer Morgan, Alvarez's voice interrupted her thoughts. We need to finish processing our suspect, and honestly, I'll have to create an incident report regarding your K-9's conduct. Mall management prioritizes all potential safety concerns, Deborah responded, her frustration hidden by her professional demeanor. Max has not exhibited this behavior previously. He holds certifications in several detection specialties and has a flawless training history. Despite this, his actions caused a disruption and caused alarm for a pregnant woman. This is an issue that cannot be disregarded. Deborah finished the required forms for the shoplifting suspect, coordinating for a patrol unit to convey him to the precinct for booking. During this time, Max appeared remarkably apprehensive, his focus frequently returning to the path the Thompsons had taken, even after they were no longer visible. When they ultimately reached their vehicle, Deborah began to question her partnership. Had she misinterpreted Max's actions? Could there have been a gap in their training that accounted for this awkward situation? The upcoming incident report would necessitate a formal reply and potentially a review of Max's certification, a bureaucratic ordeal that could affect their standing in the K-9 unit. What were you attempting to communicate to me, boy? She inquired softly. As they drove away from the mall, Max's eyes remained focused on the structure they were leaving behind. Over the years, she had come to trust his instincts without question. His abilities had located individuals when technology faltered and uncovered evidence that human investigators overlooked. However, today, his conduct had appeared erratic, lacking professionalism, and potentially harmful to their reputation. Despite this, as they drove back to the precinct, Deborah felt a persistent unease that Max had been attempting to convey something significant, something that everyone, including herself, had disregarded prematurely. The autumn rain grew stronger as Deborah guided their vehicle into the precinct's K-9-unit parking area. Her thoughts returned to the initial time she encountered Max 3 years previously at the regional training facility in eastern Washington. She was recuperating from a shoulder injury, which she had gotten during a chase, an event that made her reconsider her career in patrol. The K-9 division appeared to be an ideal change, blending her law enforcement background with her long-held love of working dogs. Max remained calmly still in his kennel, while other dogs barked and jumped energetically as potential handlers passed by. A certain quality in his concentrated, focused gaze had established a connection with her instantly, an intelligence that appeared to examine her as completely as she was assessing him. He's had 3 handlers already, the kennel master had informed her. Too intense, they'd said. Too focused on blood tracking to the exclusion of other training. Great nose, but they couldn't direct it appropriately. She knelt before his kennel, and Max approached the gate with dignified curiosity, unlike the frenetic energy of the other candidates. He's not washing out, she said with certainty. He's just waiting for someone who understands him. Their first 6 months together had been challenging. Max's extraordinary olfactory abilities sometimes overwhelmed his other training objectives. Although many police dogs receive training to identify various odors, such as narcotics or explosives, Max exhibited an exceptional and almost uncanny ability to detect blood. He was able to identify incredibly small traces that occasionally bypassed crime scene technicians, precisely locating their position with a disturbing accuracy. This remarkable talent significantly impacted their collaboration during a standard missing persons case their first year together. A 6-year-old boy had disappeared during a family hiking trip in the Cascade foothills. Standard search patterns had yielded nothing, and after 36 hours, hope was fading. Deborah had given Max one of the boy's t-shirts, expecting him to track the general scent trail. Instead, Max had detected microscopic blood traces from a small scrape the child had sustained before going missing. The blood was so minimal the parents hadn't even realized their son was injured. Following this nearly invisible trail, Max guided rescuers to an abandoned mining shaft, the location where the boy had fallen and become trapped. Medical personnel subsequently confirmed that without Max's exceptional detection abilities, they would not have found the child in time. Their most significant case occurred during the Highway 18 bridge collapse. Amid the chaos of broken concrete and twisted rebar, Max systematically located survivors by detecting blood through layers of debris. A notable example occurred when he firmly advocated for a specific area of collapsed roadway, even though thermal imaging revealed no heat signatures. Rescue personnel subsequently located a young woman experiencing hypothermia. Her core temperature was so low that sensors failed to register it. However, Max identified microscopic blood originating from her internal injuries, perceiving it through 20 feet of concrete. Following the incident, researchers from Pacific Northwest University's medical detection program contacted the department regarding a study of Max's abilities. Subsequent, controlled tests validated what Deborah already knew. Max could detect blood at concentrations as low as a few parts per billion, and even more remarkably, he could differentiate between various types of bleeding, appearing to prioritize based on the severity or source of the blood. Dr. Eleanor Patel, the program's lead researcher, had been especially intrigued by Max's seeming ability to detect internal bleeding that presented with no external signs. He's not simply smelling the blood, she explained to Deborah during one testing session. He's detecting these specific biomarkers released when certain tissues are damaged. It's as if he possesses a portable medical laboratory in his nose. This training was integrated into their standard certification process, with Max's capabilities detailed in peer-reviewed research articles and specialized law enforcement journals. His detection skills had identified gunshot victims concealed within buildings, determined internal injuries in car accident victims who presented without visible trauma, and even alerted to a brain aneurysm in a colleague during a routine training exercise. Despite this, those remarkable talents had been disregarded by all, even herself, when Max had concentrated on Emily Thompson. Now, sitting in the parking lot, rain beating on the roof of their car, Deborah resolved to act. Max had never been mistaken when expressing that degree of concern, not once in 3 years. She retrieved her phone and searched for Emily Thompson, Seattle. A social media profile surfaced instantly. The woman from the mall, whose profile picture showed her smiling next to her husband, appeared pregnant to a lesser extent in the image. Her listed previous employment was Thompson & Associates Legal Services. Deborah paused for only a moment before entering the address into her GPS. Max had relied on her judgment repeatedly throughout their partnership. It might be the right time to reciprocate that trust fully, even if it carried the risk of an official warning. The Bellevue Heights apartments presented a sharp difference from the nearby area, a contemporary high-rise with expansive windows reflecting the overcast sky. Deborah had changed into regular clothing, keeping her badge safely tucked in her jacket pocket. Max was in the passenger seat, his work vest off, but his specialized training collar still fastened. "This is likely nothing," Deborah said to him as they waited parked near the building entrance. "Should I be incorrect, this unsanctioned follow-up investigation could jeopardize both our professional lives." Max's unwavering look suggested unwavering confidence, his posture rigid with the same readiness he exhibited at the mall. When Emily Thompson's blue SUV entered the building's underground parking area, his response was instant, a quiet signal and movement forward that Deborah had come to recognize as unwavering belief. "All right, colleague," she said, starting her engine, "but we will proceed cautiously." The building's concierge halted them at the lobby entrance, observing Max with professional concern. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but pets aren't allowed in the common areas without prior arrangement." Deborah presented her badge, maintaining a conversational tone rather than an authoritative one. "I'm Officer Morgan, Seattle PD. I'm following up on an incident report involving one of your residents, Emily Thompson. It will only take a few minutes." The concierge paused, then placed a brief call that seemed to resolve any issues. 18th floor, apartment 1802. "I will inform Mr. Thompson that you are coming up." The elevator journey provided Deborah time to reevaluate her decision once more. She possessed no legitimate reason for her presence here, nor a case number to justify the follow-up. Should the Thompsons lodge a complaint about harassment, she would lack departmental protection. Despite Max's persistent focus, that characteristic intensity which had previously saved lives, it reinforced her determination. Mark Thompson opened the door, having removed his earlier business attire and opting for more relaxed clothing. His face shifted from polite curiosity to recognition and then to exhaustion. "Officer Morgan, is there an issue with Emily's statement?" "No, there wasn't," Deborah confirmed. "I wanted to discuss what happened this morning in person. My canine partner exhibited atypical behavior, and in my experience, that necessitates a reevaluation." She indicated Max, who stood attentively nearby. "I assure you he is entirely safe and remarkably well-trained." Mark's stance remained cautious, but he moved to allow passage. "Emily is currently at rest. She has reported increased discomfort this afternoon, but the physician states that is expected at 30 weeks. The apartment was spacious and tastefully furnished, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a panoramic view of Lake Washington. Emily reclined on a sectional sofa, appearing more fatigued than she had earlier that morning. A throw blanket covered her legs, even though the apartment was warm. "Officer Morgan?" Emily's surprise was clear as she attempted to sit up straighter. She asked, "Is something wrong with my witness statement?" Max's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His body tightened, his nose working quickly as he focused intently on Emily, mirroring the focus he's displayed at the mall, but now with heightened urgency. "I apologize for this unusual visit," Deborah began, keeping a firm grip on Max's lead. "But I wanted to check on you." Max is specially trained in medical detection, and his behavior this morning indicated he detected something concerning. Emily's hand moved protectively over her abdomen. The mall first aid person reported everything was fine. Deborah conceded that it was likely. However, Max had a proven ability to identify medical concerns prior to the onset of typical signs. He had been involved in medical research projects at Pacific Northwest University, consistently demonstrating a flawless record of detection accuracy. Mark approached his wife, his posture revealing a cautious disbelief. "You're implying your dog possesses knowledge regarding my wife's health that her obstetrician lacks?" Deborah selected her subsequent phrasing with deliberation. "Max possesses specialized training in blood detection, enabling him to identify internal bleeding prior to the emergence of external symptoms. He has located disaster victims beneath rubble by detecting microscopic blood traces through 20 feet of concrete. Emily shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, wincing slightly. "I've just been having some back pain and pressure," she said. "The doctor said it's normal, especially since I've been on my feet more than usual today." Max abruptly accelerated with such resolve that Deborah had to steady herself. Rather than barking, he whimpered anxiously, employing the sound he reserved for search and rescue missions when he'd found a seriously hurt individual. "When is your doctor's appointment?" Deborah inquired, her worry increasing as she noticed Emily's paleness and the slight tremor in her hands. "Not until 4, Mark replied, glancing at his watch. "About an hour from now." Deborah made a decision that could end her career if she was wrong. "Mr. Thompson, I strongly recommend you take your wife to the hospital now. Not in an hour. Right now." The assessment was based on your dog's behavior. Mark's incredulity was unmistakable. "That seems..." Mark started, but was interrupted. "It hurts," Emily said. Her voice had changed, fear edging into her tone as she pressed both hands against her abdomen. "It's getting worse, not better, and I feel dizzy when I stand up." Deborah quietly stated that those could be symptoms of placental abruption, referencing her emergency response training and the potential for internal bleeding that conventional examinations might miss in early stages. Emily's face grew even paler. "My sister experienced that with her second baby. The doctor had mentioned that I have some risk factors." Mark's skepticism vanished immediately, seeing the fear in his wife's voice. "I'll get the car," he said. Deborah countered, "I think we should call an ambulance," already reaching for her phone. If Max's observations are accurate, each minute is crucial. While she contacted 911, requesting urgent medical assistance for a potential obstetric emergency, Deborah observed Max continuing his intense monitoring of Emily. The expression in his amber eyes was familiar to her, drawn from their most vital search missions, the unwavering conviction that had guided rescuers to survivors whom others considered lost. The sound of the approaching ambulance broke through the usual sounds of the affluent neighborhood. Mark knelt beside Emily, his previous doubts gone, replaced by clear worry as he held her hand. Her condition worsened quickly in the 12 minutes since Deborah had made the call, her skin now damp, her breathing faint. "The ambulance is nearly here," Deborah told them, having ensured the paramedics could reach the apartment. Max stayed exactly where he was next to her, his vigilance unchanged, but his actions were now restrained and professional. The paramedics arrived with skill deficiency, 2 experienced emergency responders who didn't pause for greetings as they started their evaluation. They functioned with the coordinated accuracy developed over years of collaboration, one starting intravenous access while the other observed vital signs and asked pointed questions regarding the pregnancy. At 30 weeks pregnant, Emily reported increased pain and pressure today, along with dizziness when standing, as the lead paramedic worked. "Any vaginal bleeding?" he asked. "No," Emily answered, her voice weak. "Just the pain and feeling faint. It's been getting worse all day." Deborah approached. "My canine partner, Max, is specifically trained in blood detection. His behavior suggests possible internal bleeding, potentially a placental abruption." The paramedic glanced at Max, then back to Deborah, recognition dawning. Were Morgan and Max involved in the bridge collapse, the team responsible for locating the hypothermic victim? "Yes," Deborah verified, feeling a wave of relief knowing she wouldn't have to explain the atypical medical warning. The paramedic acknowledged, immediately modifying his plan. "Possible concealed abruption? Let's proceed now. Establish a wide-open 4 and prepare for obstetrical trauma at Harbor Medical." To Mark, he added, "We're transporting your wife to Harbor instead of Seattle General. This facility boasts the region's leading high-risk obstetrics team." Emily was moved to the stretcher with careful urgency. Her condition was deteriorating as her body attempted to counteract the blood loss, a detail only Max was able to discern. The paramedics permitted Mark to accompany them in the ambulance. Before the doors closed, the lead paramedic addressed Deborah. "Are you coming? If your K-9 detected anything our equipment isn't showing, the doctors will want to know precisely how he alerted." Deborah acknowledged, trailing behind in her car with Max secured in his compartment. The ambulance navigated the traffic at a measured pace, its lights and sirens clearing a path through the crowded roadways as it proceeded to the waterfront hospital complex. During the journey, Deborah's police radio transmitted an urgent notification from the ambulance. Patient becoming unresponsive, BP declining, potential obstetric hemorrhage underway, estimated time of arrival at Harbor Medical, for minutes. Deborah gripped the steering wheel, keeping pace with the ambulance. Max, unable to decipher the radio communication, noticed the shift in her stance and whimpered gently from his space. "Good boy," she said. "You were right. You knew when nobody else did." Harbor Medical's emergency entrance was already ready upon their arrival. A trauma team stood by, prepared with equipment for both Emily and the baby. Deborah observed the transfer of Emily from the ambulance, the medical personnel moving with the focused urgency characteristic of serious incidents. A tall woman in surgical scrubs approached as Emily was wheeled into the hospital, questioning the paramedics before addressing Deborah. "I'm Dr. Keisha Williams, obstetrical trauma," she stated. "They tell me your K9 detected this before conventional symptoms appeared?" Deborah confirmed. "Yes, Max is specialized in blood detection. He exhibited significant concern regarding Mrs. Thompson around 9:30 a.m. this morning, followed by heightened alarm when we examined her at her apartment around 2:45 p.m. Dr. Williams appeared contemplative, not dismissive. The first ultrasound does not reveal a clear placental abruption, but her declining blood pressure and other symptoms indicate a possible internal hemorrhage. Could your dog's behavior assist us in pinpointing the source of the bleeding?" Deborah confirmed his capability, expressing surprise but appreciating the doctor's candor. "He is trained to identify the most potent origin of the smell." The doctor then decided to bring him in, stating, "We are preparing for emergency surgery, but if your dog can provide us with any further details regarding the site of the bleeding, it could save valuable time." Deborah guided Max through the emergency department, disregarding the surprised glances from his staff as they entered the trauma bay, where Emily was now encircled by medical equipment. The monitoring devices indicated her heart rate was elevated, and her blood pressure was dangerously low, even with fluids being administered through 2 IVs. "Emily, we're going to perform an emergency cesarean," Dr. Williams was explaining. "The baby is showing signs of distress, and your condition is deteriorating." Rapid action was essential. Max proceeded with impeccable control as Deborah positioned him nearer the bed. His nose systematically scanned across Emily's body before he settled quickly, placing his paw deliberately and steadily on the upper right quadrant of her abdomen, a trained signal indicating the most concentrated source of the scent he was following. "Upper right quadrant," Dr. Williams observed. "Possible right-sided placental abruption with retroplacental bleeding. Let's move her 2 or 3 now, prepare for a possible DIC protocol, and have the neonatal team on standby for premature delivery." As they wheeled Emily toward the operating room, she reached out weakly toward Deborah and Max. "Thank you," she whispered. Mark stood still for a moment as his wife was rushed away, medical terminology passing around him too quickly to understand. Then he turned to Deborah, his face pale. "The doctor stated, if we had waited until our scheduled appointment, it would have been—" He was unable to complete the sentence. "Your wife is in good hands," Deborah reassured him, despite the seriousness of the situation being clear in the controlled disarray surrounding them. Harbor Medical possesses an exceptional trauma team. A nurse came forward to direct Mark to the surgical waiting area, noting that the procedure would probably take a minimum of 1 hour. He paused briefly to kneel beside Max before going with her. "I didn't believe," he stated quietly, his voice heavy with feeling. "But you knew. How did you know when no one else could discern it?" Deborah wished she could offer a less complicated explanation than the intricate mix of genetics, training, and the unexplainable connection between Handler and Canine that had previously saved lives. "He's special," she replied, "and he's never wrong when he alerts like that." The surgical waiting room possessed the characteristic stillness often found in hospitals, a place where time appeared to hang between hope and worry. Mark Thompson walked back and forth across the room, pausing sometimes to look out the rain-streaked windows at the harbor below, then continuing his steady steps. Deborah remained still in the corner, Max settled at her feet, yet watchful. his training enabling him to stay composed within the medical setting despite likely detecting stress from the humans nearby. "You don't need to remain," Mark stated abruptly, ending the silence that had lasted almost 30 minutes. "You've already exceeded your required responsibilities." Deborah responded, "I'd like to observe this conclusion, unless you desire solitude." Mark shook his head, returning to the molded plastic chair beside her. "No, you and Max are the reason we're here in time." He paused. "They're not just empty words when I say Emily and the baby would—" He swallowed hard, unable to complete the thought. The surgical liaison nurse had updated them once, 20 minutes into the procedure, with the measured optimism that medical professionals cultivate. Emily was stable, the surgery progressing, more information would come when available. The carefully neutral phrasing had done little to ease the tension visible on Mark's face. "Can I ask," he began after another pause, "how did your partner know?" "The doctors performed tests this morning during her routine checkup and found no cause for concern." Deborah paused, contemplating how to explain something that medical researchers were still investigating. "Max's sense of smell is approximately 40 times more powerful than ours, but it's more than just sensitivity. He had received specialized training to detect blood in quantities undetectable by standard testing. Crucially, he could distinguish between normal blood presence and unusual bleeding patterns. However, Mark pointed out there was no visible blood. Even now, the doctor explained, it was a concealed abruption. The blood didn't need to be visible to him. The body releases specific biomarkers when internal bleeding occurs. Tiny alterations in blood chemistry, undetectable through skin, breath, or even clothing, don't escape Max's awareness." Their conversation was paused as the door opened, showing Dr. Williams still wearing surgical scrubs, her expression carefully neutral, yet subtly conveying the relief that accompanied good news. "Mr. Thompson," she started, sitting in the chair opposite them, "your wife is stable now. An emergency cesarean delivery was performed, and we are currently treating the placental abruption that caused significant internal bleeding." "And the baby?" Mark asked, his voice quiet. "Your daughter is in neonatal intensive care. She is premature at 30 weeks, but is breathing independently with supplemental oxygen. Her vital signs are stable, which is notable given the situation." The visible strain lessened from Mark's body, although worry remained on his face. "Is it possible for me to see them?" "Emily is recovering now. She can be seen briefly in approximately 20 minutes. The baby will remain in the NICU, but you may visit her as well once Emily is settled." Dr. Williams then focused on Deborah and Max. "Officer Morgan, I wish to thank you and your partner for your actions. The surgical team verified a concealed placental abruption precisely where your dog indicated." "How critical was it?" Deborah inquired softly. The doctor's formal composure eased a bit. "Throughout my 15 years practicing obstetrical medicine, I have seldom observed a concealed abruption advance to such a degree without noticeable external signs. Had Mrs. Thompson arrived at her scheduled appointment, both she and the baby would likely have been in critical condition, potentially past the point where we could have provided effective intervention." Mark covered his face with his hands, the full weight of how near they had come to a tragic outcome finally registering with him. Dr. Williams added, "It's quite notable that your dog identified this issue at the mall earlier today, prior to Mrs. Thompson showing any noticeable signs. The pathology report indicates the abruption was in its initial stages then. There was microscopic bleeding that wouldn't have been picked up by standard screening methods. This aligns with his training, as Deborah clarified. Max located faint traces of blood, several hours old and too minimal for crime scene technicians to identify without specialized chemical analysis. Fortunately, his abilities helped save 2 lives today." Dr. Williams observed, consulting her pager. "The obstetrics department would be keen to learn more about the canine program. They are continuously searching for improved techniques for early detection of pregnancy complications." After the doctor departed, Mark remained silent for several minutes, processing everything. Finally, he turned to Deborah. "I dismissed him completely this morning. I thought it was just an untrained animal making a scene," he said. "Most people would have reacted the same way," Deborah assured him. "That's why I came to your apartment, despite having no official reason to follow up. I've learned to trust Max's alerts, even when they seem improbable." How did this happen without anyone noticing? Mark asked. The inquiry seemed aimed more at himself than at Deborah. Emily had a checkup just last week. All results were normal. Dr. Williams noted it was concealed. The bleeding was situated behind the placenta, not externally. Such instances are notably dangerous as they frequently lack symptoms until they reach a critical state. The liaison nurse reappeared, letting them know Emily had been moved to recovery and Mark could visit briefly. He stood up, then paused. Would you and Max join as well? For just a moment, I believe Emily would like to express her gratitude to both of you. The recovery room was softly lit and peaceful, except for the consistent beeping of the medical devices. Emily was positioned a little upright, her skin still fair, but without the bluish tinge of severe blood loss. Her eyes lit up upon seeing Mark, and then grew wide with surprise as Deborah and Max entered behind him. You remained, she said faintly, reaching out her hand. Thank you doesn't seem sufficient. Deborah moved closer to the bed, Max keeping his heels firmly planted. I'm just glad we followed up, she said. How are you feeling? Emily responded with a faint smile, like I've been hit by a truck. She added, but they say both I and Charlotte are going to be okay. Charlotte? Deborah inquired. Mark confirmed. Charlotte Morgan Thompson. We just decided on the middle name. It seemed appropriate to name her partly after the officer who saved her life, he said, his voice catching slightly. Deborah experienced a sudden emotion that constricted her throat. That's quite an honor, but Max deserves the recognition. He was the one who recognized something was amiss. Emily's eyes moved towards the Belgian Malinois, who was sitting attentively by Deborah. The doctor explained the situation, stating that Deborah had a concealed placental abruption that wouldn't have presented symptoms until it was too late. Your dog detected it hours before any medical equipment could have. Deborah explained that his nose can detect blood in concentrations as low as a few parts per billion. The research team at Pacific Northwest University continues to try and understand exactly how he distinguishes between normal blood presence and abnormal bleeding patterns. Well, whatever he sensed, Emily said, he knew before anyone else that something was seriously wrong. The doctor said, by the time we reached my scheduled appointment, she trailed off, her hand tightening around Mark's. Focusing on the encouraging aspects, the nurse interjected gently. Your daughter is progressing remarkably well, considering she was born at 30 weeks. You will be able to visit her in the NICU after you have had a little more rest. As preparations were made for Emily to get the rest she needed, Max did something unexpected. He moved a little closer, his nose softly touching Emily's hand where it lay on the blanket. The brief touch ended as he resumed his place next to Deborah, yet it brought tears to Emily's eyes. It's almost as if he knows, she murmured. Deborah affirmed with a nod, her own throat constricted with feeling. I believe he does. The neonatal intensive care unit functioned according to a unique cadence, separate from the regulated disorder of the emergency department below. Quiet tones and delicate actions fostered an environment of meticulous accuracy. While medical staff cared for the unit's small patients, 3 days elapsed since the emergency surgery. Deborah stood outside the glass-walled room, watching as Emily sat beside the incubator holding her daughter. Charlotte Morgan Thompson, born 8 weeks premature and weighing just over 3 pounds, had surpassed initial medical expectations. Despite needing continued oxygen and feeding support, she demonstrated significant strength, a quality neonatal specialist linked to the swift action that had avoided extended oxygen deficiency. She has your fighting spirit, Deborah overheard Mark say to his wife as the sliding door opened to allow another visitor. Dr. Williams came forward, holding a clipboard, her usual professional appearance relaxed by a sincere smile as she addressed the new parents. Deborah had initially intended to leave, feeling she shouldn't interrupt their private medical conversation. However, before she could depart, Mark noticed her through the window and gestured for her to join them, showing that her presence was appreciated. Officer Morgan, Dr. Williams acknowledged as Deborah entered. I was just reviewing Charlotte's progress with the Thompsons. She's exceeding our expectations for a 30-week delivery following placental abruption. Emily looked up from the incubator, her smile showing exhaustion. The transfusions and emergency surgery had taken their toll, but the medical team had assured her that with time, she would recover completely. We were just discussing arranging for Max to meet her formally once she regains some strength. The NICU supervisor has approved this as an exception. He would appreciate that, Deborah responded, feeling moved by the action. He is currently situated in the K-9 unit vehicle. Department guidelines prohibit him from entering medical facilities without explicit permission. Dr. Williams recorded a note on her clipboard. I have issued that authorization, effective immediately. I have discussed with the hospital administrator the possibility of creating a pilot program involving your K-9 unit for high-risk obstetric screenings. Your partner's capabilities could potentially transform how we identify early pregnancy complications. This idea wasn't completely surprising. Max's exceptional detection skills have previously drawn attention from the medical field, but using them in obstetrics presents a promising new area of exploration. Deborah considered the research potential involving other pregnant women, focusing on complications that could be identified before they escalated into life-threatening emergencies. She volunteered to discuss the idea with her superiors, noting that the department already had established protocols for specialized deployments in medical settings. Mark stood beside his wife, his hand gently resting on the incubator holding their daughter. I found it difficult to accept Dr. Williams' explanation of Emily's condition. The placenta had started to detach from the uterine wall that morning, coinciding with the moment your dog first alerted at the mall. The doctor detailed that the bleeding was entirely internal, adopting a clinical and precise tone. She clarified that standard screening methods would not have identified the issue at that stage. When Emily arrived at the hospital, approximately 20% of her blood volume had been lost into the concealed space behind the placenta. If the condition had advanced another 2 to 3 hours, the potential consequences would likely have been severe. Emily reached through the incubator's access port to gently touch her daughter's tiny hand. The NICU doctor explained that babies born following placental abruption frequently experience complications related to oxygen deprivation. However, Charlotte's test results are all normal. Dr. Williams clarified that we were able to deliver her because the placental separation hadn't advanced to the point where it would have jeopardized her oxygen supply. Typically, in situations like this, patients don't receive medical attention until they display significant symptoms, and the fetus has frequently been in distress for hours. A sense of the potential severity of the situation lingered briefly before Mark spoke. Hospital leadership inquired about our willingness to contribute to a case study for their medical journal. The focus would be on documenting an instance where a police canine identified a critical medical condition prior to the detection by conventional medical technology. I believe this is an excellent proposition, Deborah stated. Max's abilities warrant greater awareness within the medical field. There could be other potential uses we haven't yet explored. A soft chime from Dr. Williams's pager interrupted the discussion. Having reviewed the message, she stepped away to care for another patient, stating she would return to talk about Charlotte's feeding progress. Once she left, Emily took Deborah's hand. I can't help but think about how things might have turned out differently, Emily said. If you hadn't relied on Max to follow up, he's the one who should be recognized, Deborah replied. I nearly dismissed him myself. Were it not for our shared past, and the numerous occasions his instincts proved accurate even when they appeared unlikely, I might have considered his actions an unusual occurrence. Will you incur any repercussions for observing us without proper authorization? Mark inquired, his voice filled with worry. Deborah replied with a smile. Actually, the opposite is true. After the department became aware of the situation, they've provided complete backing. The possibility of favorable media coverage and the potential for advancements in medical research have transformed what might have been a routine matter into what my sergeant described as a public relations opportunity. Observing through the glass wall of the NICU, she noticed other small infants in their incubators, all supported by the equipment intended to maximize their chances of survival. She wondered how many of their mothers might have gained from earlier identification of complications. What number of future cases might be identified sooner? Ideally, if Max's abilities could be consistently used in medical screening. Would you and Max consider being Charlotte's godparents? Emily asked abruptly, the question surprising Deborah completely. I know it's unusual, But then so is having your life saved by a police dog with a supernatural nose. The unexpected offer moved Deborah profoundly. Throughout her career in law enforcement, she had rescued individuals and impacted numerous cases. Yet this situation felt distinct, more intimate, and deeper in significance. "We would be honored," she replied concisely, recognizing that this case had altered not only the Thompsons' lives but also her own understanding of her collaboration with Max. She had always been impressed by his exceptional skills, but now she realized that relying on those abilities could go beyond standard work rules and processes when something truly critical was involved. As she departed the NICU to get Max from the car, Deborah considered the connection that had led her to trust her colleague's judgment, even though every reasonable consideration suggested otherwise. Certain bonds transcended typical understanding, be it between a mother and child, a handler and dog, or the unusual capacity of a dog to perceive what advanced medical equipment missed until the situation was critical. The winter sun stretched shadows across the main entrance of Harbor Medical Center as Deborah led Max through the automatic doors. While they had been visiting weekly throughout Emily's lengthy recovery, today held a significant moment: Charlotte's formal release following 31 days in neonatal intensive care. The Belgian Malinois moved with impeccable discipline despite the excitement visible in his attentive stance. He had adjusted surprisingly well to the hospital setting during their earlier visits, preserving his professional attitude even as staff paused to appreciate him. He chose a specialized therapy dog designation, temporarily granted for this visit, instead of his usual working vest. The Thompson family was located in the NICU family room, where balloons and a small group of medical staff who had cared for Charlotte during her first month were gathered. The premature infant, who had previously appeared impossibly tiny, now weighed nearly 5 pounds. Her improved condition was clear in her more alert gaze and stronger movements. Emily, as mandated by hospital policy for discharge, remained in a wheelchair despite her physical recovery from surgery. A smile spread across her face when she noticed Deborah and Max entering. "The guests of honor," she announced, prompting the assembled medical team to turn. "Everyone, this is Officer Deborah Morgan and K-9 Officer Max, the team that saved both our lives." Dr. Williams approached. Perfect timing. "We were just about to have a small celebration before discharge. Charlotte has surpassed all developmental milestones." Mark came forward, gently holding his daughter. The change in him was striking. He had previously questioned Max's methods, but now he knelt with care to position his daughter at eye level with the Belgian Malinois. "Charlotte," he spoke quietly, even though the baby was too young to comprehend, "this is Max. He's the reason you and your mom are both here today." Max stayed completely still, his training enabling him to evaluate the little human without any actions that could be perceived as threatening. Following a brief period of careful observation, he performed an action that moved Deborah to tears. He slowly lowered his head in a gesture of remarkable tenderness, his nose delicately sniffing the baby's blanket before he returned to his poised sitting posture. "He remembers," Emily said softly. "Somehow he understands who she is." A representative from Pacific Northwest University's Medical Detection Program, Dr. Patel, was present for this important event. For the past month, she had held several sessions analyzing Max's capabilities, integrating the insights from Charlotte's case into her continuous research. Dr. Patel explained to the assembled medical personnel that the truly notable aspect wasn't solely his ability to identify the abruption prior to the onset of typical symptoms, but also his ability to distinguish it from standard pregnancy blood markers. His nose detected the precise biomarkers indicative of placental separation, a capability beyond the scope of our present screening procedures. A NICU nurse who had been involved in Charlotte's care from her initial arrival expressed astonishment. "In 23 years of neonatal nursing, I have encountered numerous placental abruption cases. The results are seldom this favorable, particularly with concealed abruptions, where diagnosis usually occurs only after pronounced symptoms manifest. That's why we are implementing the pilot program next month," Dr. Williams added. "Officer Morgan and Max will visit our high-risk pregnancy clinic twice weekly to screen patients. We are developing a research protocol to document and analyze his alerts." Emily reached out to stroke Max's head, a gesture the disciplined canine accepted with dignified patience. "We've been told that many women with my condition don't reach the hospital in time," she said quietly. Without immediate intervention, both mother and baby often, she didn't need to complete the thought. Everyone in the room understood the seriousness of what had nearly happened and what Max's extraordinary abilities had prevented. Mark carefully returned Charlotte to Emily's arms, the baby now sleeping peacefully, unaware of her medical journey or the significance of this day. "We wanted to give you something," he said to Deborah, retrieving a small package from beside the wheelchair. "While it may seem modest in comparison to your previous generosity, we wished for you to receive this." Within the securely packaged box was a framed photograph depicting Charlotte and her incubator, showcasing her small hand clasped around Emily's finger. Accompanying it, a silver, badge-shaped medallion bore the inscription Canine Hero, Max, along with Charlotte's birth date. "The department already presented us with formal recognition last week," Deborah remarked, moved by this thoughtful personal touch. Emily clarified that this wasn't about formal acknowledgement. "It was a gift from our family to yours, as you and Max have become to us." While they made arrangements to depart the hospital, Charlotte was safely secured in her car seat. With medical staff providing concluding directions, Deborah considered the remarkable sequence of occurrences that led them to this point. What started as a standard shoplifting call had fundamentally altered not only the Thompsons' lives, but potentially the future of maternal-fetal medicine. The hospital administrator had spoken with her earlier that week regarding the possibility of expanding the pilot program into a lasting screening initiative, one that could eventually be mirrored in hospitals nationwide. Max's capabilities, previously viewed as exceptional even within the specialized field of canine units, could potentially lead to a completely novel method for the early detection of pregnancy complications. As they accompanied the family to their vehicle, Deborah noted Max's persistent attentiveness, not the frantic vigilance of that initial meeting, but the content focus of a protector whose responsibility was now secure. Certain bonds defied easy understanding, whether built over years of collaboration or forged in a sudden crisis when intuition trumped formal instruction. As they arrived at the parking area, Emily spoke to Deborah for a final moment. "The doctor informed me yesterday that if we had delayed even 2 more hours, neither Charlotte nor I would have made it. I can never adequately express my gratitude for heeding Max's concerns when everyone else disregarded them." Deborah observed Mark fastening the car seat, Charlotte sleeping soundly inside. "That's what partnership signifies," she stated quietly. "Occasionally, one must have faith, despite not completely comprehending." This feeling resonated as much within her connection with Max as it did regarding the remarkable rapport they had cultivated with the Thompson family. A note that frequently, the most meaningful relationships arise from instances where we choose to listen to intuition over reason, believe instead of question, and connect instead of withdraw. Have you ever observed an animal recognizing something before humans were able to perceive it? The remarkable story of Max and Officer Morgan illustrates that our animal companions often sense threats that are unseen by us. Their heightened senses, especially their remarkable ability to detect anomalies, occasionally alert them to medical conditions, natural disasters, or other threats well before we become aware. Throughout history, accounts have arisen of dogs detecting cancer in their owners, sensing oncoming seizures, or even alerting to significant changes in blood sugar levels. Although scientific research continues to examine these extraordinary capabilities, it remains undeniable that animals occasionally detect things that even advanced medical technology misses. Considering the critical emergency experienced by Emily and Charlotte Thompson, should trained police dogs be utilized more frequently in medical environments? Max's remarkable capability to identify a hidden placental abruption hours prior to standard signs emerging indicates possible, yet unrealized, possibilities for canine teams extending past typical law enforcement duties. With medical detection dogs increasingly utilized for conditions like diabetes and epilepsy, possibly law enforcement canines, through specialized training, could fill essential gaps in healthcare screening. What's the most astonishing animal instinct story you've encountered? You may have observed a pet acting unusually before an earthquake, a service dog alerting to an undetected medical emergency, or another striking example of animal perception that went beyond common understanding. We are interested in hearing about your experiences with these exceptional bonds between humans and animals. If Max and Officer Morgan's story resonated with you, please like and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. These incredible canine stories showcase the remarkable bond between handlers and their four-legged partners, connections that sometimes transcend explanation and occasionally save lives when it matters most. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We share new police canine stories regularly, each highlighting the remarkable abilities of these highly trained animals and the officers who work alongside them. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss a new upload. Watch our previous canine hero stories, which are appearing on your screen now. From drug detection and criminal apprehension to search and rescue operations, these incredible working dogs continue to prove that sometimes the most powerful tools in law enforcement have four paws and an extraordinary nose. We'll see you tomorrow with another brand new video. The funeral was silent, heavy with grief until the police dog acted. He jumped onto his handler's casket, and his subsequent actions left the entire room in tears. Here's what happened. But before we get into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. And if you love extraordinary police dog stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The October morning arrived gray and somber, as if the sky reflected the sadness of those assembled at Oakwood Memorial Chapel. A cool breeze stirred the nearby maple trees, their crimson leaves sometimes detaching to briefly swirl, before landing on the gravel pathway where numerous police cruisers were arranged in precise formation. Within the chapel, the atmosphere was thick with the combined fragrances of polished wood, floral displays, and the palpable stress of shared sorrow. Officers in dress blues occupied the pews, their badges adorned with black mourning bands. Their faces, typically hardened by years of service, visibly strained to remain composed as they observed the flag-draped casket at the room's front. Officer Michael Mike Reeves, 34 years old and an 8-year veteran of the Riverside Police Department, a recipient of 2 commendations for bravery, rested silently within the wooden box. An official portrait, positioned on an easel next to the casket, depicted a man with keen hazel eyes and a gentle smile that didn't fully convey a solemn demeanor. In the front row, Mike's parents were seated, visibly burdened by the sorrow of outliving their son. His mother held a handkerchief, while his father, a former officer, gazed forward. Next to them, Mike's sister Elaine dabbed at tears that appeared unending, her shoulders shaking with each inhale. Near the side entrance, a disturbance caught the attention of several people. Officer Terrence Wilson worked to manage a Belgian Malinois, whose strong physique trembled with anticipation. The dog's golden-brown eyes moved quickly around the chapel, examining every face and every area, as if looking for someone expected to be present. "Easy, Ranger," Wilson said softly, tightening his hold on the leash as the dog made a low, mournful sound. Ranger had been Mike's partner for 4 years. Working as a team, they had located missing children, arrested dangerous suspects, and uncovered hidden contraband that could have gone unnoticed. They were the K-9 unit's most accomplished team. Now Ranger's ears twitched, his nose working intensely, showing uncertainty in his posture. 4 years prior, Officer Mike Reeves had been in the impersonal hallway of the Regional K-9 Training Center, anxiously straightening his uniform collar. Following 6 years of patrol work, he received approval for the K-9 unit, a goal he'd held since his academy days. The training sergeant, a stern woman named Martinez with 20 years of experience visible on her face, guided him towards the kennels. She cautioned him, her keys making noise as they walked, not to become too attached too quickly. He would work with 3 prospects before final assignments were made. Some partnerships succeed, others fail. The dog's choice is as important as your own. A lively atmosphere filled the kennel area. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Dutch Shepherds were watchful in their enclosures. Martinez paused at the 3rd kennel, where a tan Malinois with distinctive facial markings stood rigidly at attention, amber eyes following every movement. "This is Ranger, 18 months old, imported from a European working line," Martinez said, observing Mike's reaction. "He has a high drive, high intelligence, and could be too intense for some handlers." A prior candidate found him unmanageable, describing him as too intense. Mike lowered himself to the dog's level, keeping eye contact. Typically, police dogs displayed immediate enthusiasm or aggression upon approach, but Ranger was an exception. He stayed perfectly still, evaluating Mike with a disconcerting intensity, as if peering directly through him. "Hey there, partner," Mike said gently. At those words, a slight alteration appeared in Ranger's stance. A minor change that only Martinez detected, his eyebrows lifting a little. The dog moved toward the kennel gate with careful steps, paused once to sniff at Mike's offered hand, then settled, holding eye contact. "Well," Martinez said, "that's certainly not what I expected." The bond was instant, though neither person nor dog could articulate it. When they started training together the following day, the other handlers observed in amazement as Ranger seemed to predict Mike's instructions almost before he voiced them. By the third week, Martinez discontinued the rotations, formally assigning pairs. Their initial significant challenge arose 6 months later, a missing 10-year-old child in Oakwood Park. The search had been ongoing for hours, with numerous agencies searching the thick woodland as night fell and temperatures decreased. Mike observed Ranger assessing the scene, tracking a scent trail that other canines had overlooked. "He's detected something," Mike transmitted to the command post. "We are proceeding east towards the creek bed." Rain had begun to fall, washing away scent particles, but Ranger never hesitated. He led Mike through thickets and over fallen trees until they found the boy, huddled beneath an overhanging embankment, hypothermic but alive. Their partnership extended beyond statistics. Mike had remained single, his apartment becoming their shared domain. Morning runs continued regardless of weather. Evenings were spent reinforcing training exercises that had become more like games, their lives completely intertwined. Mike's parents had thoughtfully provided Ranger with a Christmas stocking, acknowledging him as part of the family. The 911 call was received at 2:34 a.m. on Thursday, reporting a domestic disturbance on Elm Street, a residential area of modest single-family homes. Dispatch records indicated this was the third call originating from that address within the past 2 months, with prior incidents resolved without any arrests. Officer Chun was already en route, requesting additional support as per standard protocol. K9-7 was ready to assist, as Mike had radioed, with Ranger alert in the specialized compartment behind him. Acknowledged K9-7. The report indicated a male subject, possibly armed, with children present in the home. Mike's cruiser arrived approximately half a block from the address, maintaining dark lights to minimize the risk of escalation. Chen's patrol car was already on scene, positioned strategically to provide cover. Mike secured Ranger's tactical harness, and the dog instantly transitioned to working mode. "Report, what is the situation?" "Mike," she said as they neared Chun, who was positioned behind her vehicle door, hand on her holster. The male subject was identified as Jacob Reynolds, age 42. His wife had initiated the call, stating he had been consuming alcohol and had begun threatening her with a handgun when she announced her intention to leave him. 2 children were present inside the residence, aged 8 and 5. The house appeared dark, with only a single light illuminating the living room. Abruptly, the front door swung open, and a woman emerged, holding 2 children, all still in pajamas. "He's got a gun," she gasped, as Chen directed them towards the patrol cars. He stated he wasn't returning to jail. A records check verified Reynolds had previous arrests for assault and unlawful possession of a firearm. The situation had progressed from a domestic disturbance to a potential armed standoff. Reinforcements were on the way, estimated time of arrival 4 minutes. Dispatch updated, SWAT alerted but assembling. "We might not have 4 minutes," Mike responded, observing movement at the window. The subject appeared increasingly agitated. Additional patrol units arrived, officers taking positions around the perimeter. Mike released Ranger's leash, giving him a hand signal to stay close, a command that would keep the dog within 3 feet without restricting his movement. They proceeded to the side of the house, utilizing shadows for cover. "Got a visual," Mike reported quietly into his shoulder. Mike's subject in living room, confirmed armed, handgun in right hand, appears highly agitated. Captain Walsh's voice crackled over the radio. "Hold positions."
Ostage négociateur en route.
Reynolds, however, disregarded the order. The front door exploded inward. A figure appeared against the light within, weapon raised. "Stay back," he yelled, swinging the gun haphazardly between officers. Reynolds discharged a stray shot that struck Chen's patrol car. Officers retreated behind cover, issuing verbal instructions but refraining from firing due to the family's location behind vehicles. Reynolds moved down the front steps. One now pointed directly at the group, including his wife and children. Mike assessed the situation instantly. Reynolds had an unobstructed view of his family. Officers lacked a secure vantage point, and the man's finger was closing on the trigger. Mike gave Ranger the silent command they'd practiced repeatedly. 2 quick taps on his thigh, indicating an apprehension attack. Ranger surged forward with explosive speed, a tan blur in the darkness. At the same time, Mike moved to flank, positioning himself between Reynolds and his intended targets. Reynolds noticed the dog approaching and redirected his weapon towards the new danger. 2 shots echoed through the night. Ranger connected with Reynolds' arm, the expertly trained bite causing the man to drop his weapon. Both men went down, but Reynolds managed to fire first, with a bullet impacting Mike's chest just beneath his vest. A second shot followed from Mike's service weapon as he fell, hitting Reynolds in the shoulder, disabling him but not fatally. "Officer down! Officer down!" Chen's voice broke over the radio as she hurried to Mike, who had fallen onto the asphalt. Ranger kept his hold on Reynolds until another officer secured the suspect, then immediately moved away from the scene, a course of action he would not typically take, and rushed to Mike's side. The dog whined, pawing at his partner's chest where blood was quickly spreading across his uniform. "Stay with me, Reeves," Chen urged, applying pressure to the wound. "Bus is 2 minutes out." Mike's breathing came in shallow gasps, his eyes finding Ranger's. He whispered, "Good boy," lifting a shaking hand to touch the dog's head. "Best partner ever." Ranger lay down beside him, pressing his body against Mike's side as paramedics arrived. They worked frantically, loading Mike into the ambulance, but the bullet had struck at an angle that sent it beneath the protective vest, severing a major artery. Officer Michael Reeves was pronounced dead at Riverside Memorial Hospital at 3:28 a.m. While emergency personnel desperately attempted resuscitation, Ranger stayed in the emergency room hallway, with Officer Wilson holding his leash. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the trauma bay doors. When the doctor finally came out, shaking his head, Ranger appeared to comprehend before any words were spoken. His body drooped, the confident stance faltering as a howl began, a sound so intense, so resembling human sorrow, that seasoned emergency staff averted their gaze. Inside the chapel, the funeral service had commenced. Chief Roberts moved to the podium, his usual strong demeanor tempered by sorrow. Officer Michael Reeves represented the epitome of what it means to serve in the badge. He began to speak, his resonant voice firm despite the emotion evident in his eyes. During his 8 years of service, he demonstrated consistent courage, compassion, and dedication to this community. Nearby, Ranger's restlessness grew. Wilson held the leash securely, yet the dog's attention remained fixed, focused on the casket where his partner rested. The chief noted that Mike's devotion to his canine partner, Ranger, had forged one of the most successful teams in our department. Together they were credited with over 200 successful operations, saving countless lives and enhancing the safety of our community. Mike's mother wept softly, comforted by her husband's embrace. His sister Elaine remained stiffly beside them, sometimes touching the canine unit pin Mike had given her last Christmas. Captain Walsh then stepped to the podium, recounting a memory of Mike's first day on patrol. He arrived 30 minutes early, his uniform so impeccably pressed it appeared it could have cut paper. Walsh remembered, prompting a few sorrowful smiles. When I inquired about his promptness, he stated, "My dad always told me if you're on time, you're already late." Mike consistently exceeded expectations. As personal recollections transitioned into the official ceremony, Ranger displayed increasing signs of distress. The dog breathed rapidly, adjusting his posture, and kept his gaze fixed on the casket. Wilson worked to manage the situation, understanding the importance of the moment, yet obligated to ensure order throughout the service. The department chaplain commenced the religious segment of the service, his words of comfort seeming inadequate given the sight of a flag-draped casket and a room filled with grief. Though Officer Reeves walks through the valley of the shadow of death, he fears no evil, the chaplain stated. At these words, Ranger emitted a low whine that resonated through the quiet chapel, and several heads turned, with expressions of understanding rather than annoyance appearing on their faces. The service continued with the presentation of Mike's badge and service weapon to his parents. The department's bagpipe player moved to the front, the poignant melody of Amazing Grace echoing through the chapel. As the bagpipes ceased, a quiet stillness settled over the chapel. The funeral director walked to the podium, ready to provide directions for the procession to the cemetery. Prior to speaking, Ranger's demeanor changed significantly. The Belgian Malinois froze, his body trembling as if electrified. His eyes fixed on the casket widened. His breathing quickened, nostrils flaring as he perceived something only he could detect. Every muscle in his powerful frame tensed, coiling like a spring. "Something's wrong," Wilson whispered to Martinez, tightening his grip on the leash. "He's never acted like this before." Martinez recognized the signs. "That's not aggression," she whispered back. "That's recognition." At that moment, Ranger initiated his action with a swift advance that surprised Wilson. The dog broke free of the leash held by his handler. Multiple officers reacted to try and stop him, but Ranger was too quick. His actions were deliberate and purposeful as he sped down the central aisle. A collective intake of breath spread through the chapel as the Belgian Malinois moved toward the front, his paws making no sound on the carpeted floor. Mike's mother emitted a quiet cry, his father partially rising from his seat. Chief Roberts prepared to proceed, yet Ranger's behavior created a moment of hesitation for all present. It wasn't a display of hostility or fear, it was a sign of clear intention. Ranger approached the casket and halted, inhaling deeply around its sides. Then, with the same effortless skill that had distinguished him during his service, he jumped up, his front paws landing softly on the casket's rim. For a brief instant, he maintained his balance there, his amber eyes assessing the gathered mourners as if awaiting consent. There was no movement and no sound. A hush fell over the entire room. Ranger, with deliberate motions, pulled himself completely onto the casket, his nails producing the faintest clicking sound on the polished wood. The American flag covering the casket moved a little under his weight. The dog turned once, then positioned himself on top of the casket, directly above where Mike's chest would be. "Oh my God," Elaine whispered, tears flowing down her face. Ranger lowered his head, pressing his nose against the wood. He took a deep breath, then released it in a trembling exhale that appeared to hold all the grief imaginable. His ears pressed against his head as he whined, a sound so sorrowful it seemed to permeate the very walls. "Should I?" Wilson began, taking a tentative step forward. Captain Walsh raised a hand, halting him. "No," he said softly, "let him be." The dog's behavior shifted from active to observant. He assumed the familiar alert stance he had held many times in the patrol car, watchful, protective, prepared. His gaze moved across the room as if still performing his duties, still safeguarding his partner. Ranger remained perfectly still, his chest rising and falling in a pattern that appeared synchronized with an unseen power. The first shock among those grieving subsided into a deep silence, not distressing, but respectful. Then Ranger performed an action that shifted the moment from poignant to truly unforgettable. With deliberate slowness, he lifted his right paw and pressed it flat against the American flag, precisely over the spot where Mike's badge would be on his uniform. He maintained the position, unwavering, resolute, and clear. Elaine reacted with a gasp, her hand covering her mouth. "The salute," she breathed, her voice just audible to those close by. "That's Mike's special signal." A quiet buzz of conversation arose within the chapel, as those familiar with the meaning shared it with others. 3 years prior, Mike had developed a distinctive training cue with Ranger. It was a discreet signal, used exclusively between them, a customized gesture that Ranger would execute only in reaction to Mike's particular hand movement. This was not a component of regular police K-9 instruction. It was intimate, unique, and shared solely by them. Officer Chun, who was present the night Mike passed, moved closer to Captain Walsh. "Mike's last touch," she whispered, her voice cracking. Prior to the ambulance arrival, he touched Ranger's head in the manner he always used when issuing that command. It wasn't simply a gesture, Martinez explained softly to those present. It represented their method of conveying a message, signifying mission accomplishment when verbal communication was impossible. I have never observed another team exhibiting such a profound connection. As Ranger held the salute, his gaze remained steady and observant, as if anticipating additional direction. A profound quiet settled over the chapel, punctuated only by quiet weeping from Mike's family. Mike's father rose abruptly, his action capturing everyone's attention. The former officer moved toward the casket deliberately, maintaining a dignified posture despite the sadness visible on his face. He halted near Ranger, standing respectfully without touching the dog. Then, with careful control, he performed a formal police salute. "Mission accomplished, son," he said, his voice thick with feeling but audible in the still room. One by one, each uniformed officer in the chapel stood and repeated the gesture, a multitude of salutes recognizing not only their deceased comrade, but the connection they were observing. Even civilian mourners rose, palms on their chests, accepting something beyond common comprehension. Ranger maintained his posture for a few more seconds, then gradually lowered his paw. He adjusted his position near the casket, turning to look at Mike's father. The dog's ears rose, his keen eyes observing the man's face. "He was so proud to be your partner," Mike's father said to Ranger, his voice a quiet murmur. "Every day he told us how fortunate he was to have you." The chaplain, who had been observing with evident feeling, moved forward once more. "In 20 years of service to the department," he said, speaking to those present, "I have conducted far too many ceremonies like this one. I have never seen such a demonstration of the connection between an officer and his canine partner." He paused, regaining his composure. "It seems there are relationships in this world that even death cannot break." The chaplain's words appeared to fill the chapel, offering solace where it had seemed impossible just before. Mike's mother, who had been almost devastated, stood a little straighter, her gaze fixed on Ranger. Mike frequently claimed the dog understood everything, she stated, in a voice audible to those around. He asserted Ranger could occasionally read his mind. She wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "I believed he was overstating things." Chief Roberts approached the podium once more, his own demeanor noticeably strained. "I believe we should modify our proceedings," he remarked, glancing at the funeral director. "It seems Ranger will be with his partner for the rest of the service." Throughout the service, Ranger stayed on the casket, a quiet protector watching over his companion. The funeral director, showing impressive flexibility, modified the arrangements to accommodate the dog. The customary pallbearers were in place, though questions remained regarding the concluding procession. "We need to proceed to the cemetery shortly," the director said to Captain Walsh. Walsh responded with a nod, then moved towards the casket with deliberate steps. Ranger spoke softly, mirroring the tone he had often heard Mike use. "We need to take Mike now." The dog's ears twitched at the familiar name, his amber eyes following Walsh's movements. He remained still, shifting his weight and settling more firmly atop the American flag. Mike's sister, Elaine, rose from her seat, dabbing her eyes with a crumpled tissue. She walked towards the casket, her steps unsteady but resolute. She had observed the strong connection between her brother and his canine partner from the very beginning. She recalled numerous family dinners where Ranger sat at Mike's feet, and holidays where the dog received gifts alongside everyone else. "Ranger," she said softly, extending her hand palm up, mirroring the gesture she had seen Mike use many times. "It's okay, boy." The Belgian Malinois' attention turned to her, his nostrils flaring slightly as he analyzed her scent. The scent was close enough to Mike's to be recognized as belonging to his family. His ears moved forward, his head tilting as if assessing the situation. "Mike would be so proud of you," she said, her voice cracking. "You were the best partner he could have wished for, the best friend." Something in her words, or perhaps her tone, appeared to connect with the dog. Ranger looked from Elaine to the casket below him, then back to her. A quiet whine came from his throat. It wasn't a sound of distress now, but of inquiry. "I know," she murmured. "I miss him too." With extreme gentleness, she placed her hand on the dog's back. Ranger tensed briefly, then relaxed into the touch. Elaine stroked his fur, mirroring the way she'd seen her brother do after their shifts together. "We need to take Mike to his resting place now," she explained, speaking as if the dog understood every word. Perhaps he did. "Will you help us do that?" The chapel remained utterly silent, with everyone holding their breath as they observed this private moment. Ranger regarded Elaine for a considerable time, then rose slowly and deliberately. His movements were measured and respectful, ensuring his stability on the casket's curved top. For a brief moment he stood rigidly, resembling a dog in peak condition. Then, with a grace that moved many to tears, he descended from the casket, stepping gently onto the carpeted floor near Elaine. Wilson moved forward with the leash, but Elaine halted him with a raised hand. "Let him walk with us," she said, "with no restrictions. Mike would have wanted it." Chief Roberts gave his consent, and Wilson moved aside. The pallbearers arranged themselves, raising the casket with coordinated precision. As the solemn procession began its descent down the central aisle, Ranger stepped alongside the casket, positioned at heel, precisely where he would have walked beside Mike during patrols. Outside, the autumn air held the fragrance of rain in the distance. The hearse door closed with a quiet finality, sealing the last chapter. Ranger watched, a flicker of confusion returning to his stance. Wilson approached, anticipating the dog might need reassurance, but before he could offer the leash, Ranger acted. The Belgian Malinois walked purposefully to the police motorcycle that would lead the procession, Mike's motorcycle, now solemnly draped in ceremonial black bunting. Ranger settled beside it, adopting the familiar posture he'd used countless times when Mike was getting ready for their shift. Captain Walsh looked at the motorcycle officer who would be leading the procession. "Can you accommodate him?" The officer, who had previously worked with Mike and Ranger for years, responded immediately. "It would be an honor, sir." With care, the officer assisted Ranger into the specially adapted sidecar, designed for K-9 transport during parades and ceremonial events. The dog relaxed, his demeanor alert yet composed, as if accepting the situation. Upon arrival at the cemetery, the concluding ceremonies proceeded with military formality. The honor guard conveyed the casket to the gravesite, with Ranger following closely, still unrestrained but maintaining impeccable control. The chaplain offered concluding words of solace as the casket was placed. As the formal folding of the flag commenced, Ranger observed with unwavering attention, following each action. The carefully folded triangle was given to Mike's mother, who held it close. Next, the rifle salute occurred, 3 volleys that echoed through the autumn air. Ranger reacted slightly at the initial shots, but remained in position. By the 3rd volley, he remained perfectly still at attention, seemingly acknowledging the respect being shown. As the bugler played taps, the somber notes lingered in the air. Ranger advanced 3 steps. With careful movements, he lifted his paw again, pressing it against the casket in that customary salute, a concluding gesture between comrades that moved many to tears. When the final note subsided, Ranger retreated, then settled down near the gravesite, his chin resting on his paws. He remained steadfast until the last mourner had left. The cemetery gradually emptied, with mourners departing in small groups, many taking a moment to look back at the striking scene. A devoted dog kept watch near his partner's final resting place. Mike's family were the last to leave the gravesite. His father knelt beside Ranger, placing a calloused hand on the dog's back. "You'll always have a home with us, boy," he said, his voice thick with feeling. Mike would have wanted us to support one another at this time. The Belgian Malinois looked up at him, its amber eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that went beyond the boundaries of species. He shifted a little closer, acknowledging the bond, then turned his attention to the casket now being placed in the ground. Captain Walsh came forward, taking off his formal hat and holding it to his chest. He stated that the department had considered Ranger's future. Traditionally, canines are retired after their handlers pass away. Mike's mother looked up sharply. He was too young to retire. Too skilled. Walsh nodded. "That's what we believe as well. With your permission, Officer Wilson has volunteered to become Ranger's new handler. They already share a connection, and Wilson initially trained with Mike." Elaine wiped away fresh tears. Mike would agree. He often said Wilson was the only other officer Ranger seemed to truly listen to. As if in agreement with her words, Ranger stood, shaking his coat slightly. He glanced between the family members and Walsh, then purposefully moved to stand beside Wilson, who had come closer quietly. "I'll never replace Mike," Wilson said, his voice faltering. "I wouldn't attempt to, but I pledge to you and Ranger that I will respect their partnership in our work together." Ranger looked once more at the gravesite, his stance conveying a sense of finality, an acceptance that had not been visible previously. With deliberate movements, he turned and walked beside Wilson toward the waiting police vehicles. He did not look back. As any good officer would, he was moving forward, carrying the legacy of his fallen partner with him into whatever missions awaited. The bond between a canine officer and their handler exemplifies one of the most sincere partnerships in law enforcement, founded on absolute trust, steadfast loyalty, and a connection that transcends verbal communication. The final tribute given by Ranger serves as a poignant reminder that profound feelings are often conveyed through actions rather than words. Have you ever observed a moment where an animal appeared to comprehend death or loss in a manner that seemed inexplicable? What fosters such strong connections between humans and their canine partners that they can surpass even the final parting? If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like and share it with someone who appreciates the extraordinary bond between handlers and their canine partners. These incredible dogs risk their lives alongside human officers every day, demonstrating courage and loyalty that deserve our recognition and respect. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story about police canine heroes. Our collection of true stories about dogs keeps expanding, with new videos added each week to display these extraordinary collaborations. Please view the suggested videos currently displayed for additional moving narratives that emphasize the steadfast commitment of police dogs nationwide. We will also see you again tomorrow at the same time with another fresh video.